Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Winifred Smith Jenkins, and I serve as the Director of Early Childhood Policy and Advocacy, Advocates for Children of New Jersey, and as the co-chair of the Start Strong New Jersey campaign. We are so glad to see so many champions for children with us today from across our great state. Before we begin, just a note on participation. We invite you to introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know your name, your organization, and where in our state you're joining us from. Feel free to use the chat to connect and engage with one another throughout the program. If you have questions for our speakers, please place those in the Q&A box so we can make sure they're captured for discussion later in the program. Let me briefly share with you what to expect from today's program. We'll begin with a brief overview of the Start Strong New Jersey blueprint, followed by the campaign video. Then you'll hear from members of the Start Strong New Jersey advisory group and one of our campaign partners who will share perspectives from the field. After that, Megan and I will highlight the blueprint's key policy priorities that we are actively working to advance this year. You'll also hear about ways you can engage with and amplify the campaign. And we'll close with a short Q&A. Before we begin, I want to start with gratitude. First, I want to thank the generous funders whose support made this work possible. We are deeply grateful to the Burke Foundation, the Community Foundation of New Jersey, the Geraldine R. Dodge Foundation, the Marr Charitable Foundation, the Schumann Foundation for New Jersey, the Henry and Marilyn Taub Foundation, and last but definitely not least, the Terrell Fund. Their investment helped bring this campaign together and supported the development of the blueprint we are launching today. I also want to thank the members of the Start Strong New Jersey Advisory Group for the experience, insight, and honesty they brought to this process. And finally, I want to recognize our co-chairs, John Shore and Jane O'Connor, whose expertise helped shape this blueprint into something both ambitious and practical. See, today's conversation is happening at an important moment for our state. New Jersey has just welcomed a new administration, and that creates real opportunity. It gives us a chance to take a fresh look at the pressures families are facing and to advance solutions that are practical, urgent, and long overdue. And we want to take a moment to acknowledge an important step in that direction. Yesterday, Governor Sherrill's proposed budget included an additional $18 million to fully reopen New Jersey's Child Care Assistance Program. In a very difficult budget year, that matters. It means thousands of working families could once again get the help affording childcare that they needed. This is significant and it deserves recognition. We're also encouraged by the proposed investments in public preschool, continued support for family tax credits, and funding for childcare facilities. These are important steps that acknowledge both the cost of raising children and the growing pressures facing working families across our state. But we also know this clearly. While these steps matter, they do not yet address the years of strain and instability that have built up in New Jersey's childcare system. And addressing that will require all of us working together to build a stronger, more sustainable system for families, early childhood educators, and communities. You see, families across New Jersey are still being asked to carry an impossible burden. Childcare remains too expensive, too hard to find, and too unstable for too many families. Providers are under strain. Early childhood educators are underpaid, and the consequences reach far beyond individual households. New Jersey loses an estimated $5 billion every year due to childcare breakdowns, resulting in lost productivity, workforce disruptions, and broader economic harm. So let's be very clear. Childcare is not a private problem for families to solve on their own. Childcare is an essential economic infrastructure. It is a public good. And that's why Start Strong New Jersey exists. This campaign brings together parents, early childhood educators, business leaders, researchers, policy experts, and advocates around a shared belief. Every child in New Jersey deserves a strong start. Families should be able to access affordable, high quality childcare when they need it. And the childcare workforce should be professionally compensated and supported. And employers should be able to rely on a workforce that can show up because dependable care and early childhood education exist. That vision is what shaped the blueprint for affordable childcare. New Jersey doesn't work without it. This blueprint reflects months of collaboration and input from across the state. And today, we are so excited to share it with you. To get us started, I am pleased to introduce John Shore, co-author of the blueprint and founder and former president of New Jersey Policy Perspective, where he helped build one of the state's leading research and advocacy organizations. Earlier in his career, he also served as communications director for Governor Jim Florio. John will walk us through the thinking behind the blueprint and the principles that shape it. John, over to you.
Thank you, Winifred, and thanks to all of you for joining us this afternoon. As Jane O'Connor and I were working on writing the blueprint, it became pretty clear early on that the conversation about making childcare affordable starts with the unfortunate reality that for so many families, there's never enough time and everything costs more than it used to. Start Strong New Jersey believes that parents deserve the freedom to make choices about how they raise their children without constantly worrying about whether they can afford the cost or find the time. Today's world is different from our parents and our grandparents. The pressures on families are enormous. And this time and money conundrum is too complicated, as Winifred alluded to, for any family to solve on its own. And there are ripple effects from the problems of childcare today. And these ripple effects not only harm families with or without children, but they hurt everyone in this state and the economy as a whole. No list of policy issues to address affordability in this state is complete if it doesn't include making affordable, high-quality childcare available to every family who needs it. Thank you. We also believe that New Jersey should be a place where all families and all communities thrive in a growing economy that offers opportunity. Along those lines, it's important to point out that high-quality childcare, especially for infants and toddlers, will pay big dividends in the short and long term. But, and we were glad to hear what Governor Sherrill said yesterday about the budget, childcare for our youngest learners receives just a sliver of the public funding pie compared to other age groups. It's important for this conversation that everybody knows that a well-supported early childhood education workforce isn't just one piece of the puzzle, it's the link that holds the entire childcare sector together. And there's science behind this. Brains are built from the bottom up. Early experiences and relationships create the base for all learning and later development. So there's no question about it. Investing in children, especially in their earliest years, pays off for everyone. And there's a strong economic case to be made too. Childcare makes work possible by supporting every other part of the economy. As Winifred pointed out, it's essential economic infrastructure. You'll hear us talk about this a lot, just like roads, bridges, education, power line, and all the other things that we recognize to be a public responsibility for the good of us all. As we started to say before, for thousands of working parents, finding and paying for high-quality childcare is a puzzle without a solution. And if we ever could, today we certainly can't ask individual families to solve this on their own. It's too big a problem. For most families in New Jersey, childcare is the single largest household expense, bigger than rent or mortgage. And early childhood educators are also a big part of the solution here because, as Winifred said, they're underpaid, seriously underpaid. The median wage for early educators nationwide is below 97% of all other occupations. In fact, nearly 40% of infant toddler educators in New Jersey are paid so little they qualify for public benefits like Medicaid and SNAP, and they can't even afford childcare for their own children. Well, all of this led us to three guiding principles that are the foundations for everything Start Strong New Jersey does, and for the recommendations that you'll hear Winifred start to highlight in a couple of minutes. The first principle: childcare must be affordable and accessible for every family that needs it. The second principle: early childhood educators must be compensated and supported as the professionals that they are. They spend a lot of time with our kids in the most impressionable time of our kids' lives. And the third principle: childcare must be recognized as essential economic infrastructure and funded accordingly. And with that background, I want to turn your attention now to the Start Strong New Jersey campaign video. So sit back for the next few minutes and hear our story. If you've heard it before, I'm sure you'll be glad to hear it again. Let's go to the video.
New Jersey, home to Bruce Springsteen, Whitney Houston, the world's best diners, and people who know how to work hard and dream big. But let's be clear, greatness doesn't just appear out of thin air. It begins with strong foundations, and there's no foundation more essential than childcare. Without it, families can't work, businesses can't grow, and our economy, well, it grinds to a halt. We've traveled across the state to hear the realities of parents, business leaders, and childcare professionals. These are their stories.
There have definitely been times where I'm like, it's just too expensive here. And it doesn't make life easy for middle of the road people.
I mean, to put it in better terms, you're basically paying a mortgage to send a child to daycare.
Literally living like paycheck to paycheck, so I'm gonna work just to pay for childcare.
All our family members work, they do their own thing, have their own children. There is no other viable option. My wife or I would have to stay home.
Having access to support's super important, but I think we have to look at bigger systems because having a decent quality of living feels like it's getting so much more difficult here in New Jersey.
I can't support my child if I don't have the support, you know? I do feel like New Jersey is failing me, only because it feels like there's a lack of support. It's hard. That's all I can say. It's hard.
Childcare has become so expensive in New Jersey, outpacing college tuition. The struggle to afford it lives everywhere, in our rural areas, in our urban area, and it very much lives in our suburban areas, which I don't think that many people recognize. Childcare is plain unaffordable for most of New Jersey, no matter where you are.
When somebody is babysitting your child, your niece, your nephew, whatnot, are they in an environment where they're being taken care of all around? Are their physical needs being met? Their emotional needs? Are their developmental milestones being met? You don't get that in babysitting. You get that in childcare settings.
Not investing in childcare is more than just not helping a family afford the tuition. If you take childcare away from a single family, you are taking away labor participation. And when you take away labor participation, you take away healthcare. And when you take away healthcare, you take away access to the most basic things that children and families need. And so there's no way to slice a good outcome for underinvesting in childcare.
Childcare at the local level is something that you can see causes tremendous stress for a lot of people because it impacts their ability to go to work each day, and it impacts their ability to maybe be caregivers for their elderly parents or someone else in the community. It also can impact their ability to get an education and achieve economic stability for their family. So childcare in our local communities is of tremendous importance, and when people aren't supported, you can feel the impact of that.
Right now, New Jersey has the momentum. This is our chance to again set the standard for early care and education in our nation. We have some great examples that are happening around the country that we could absolutely adapt to a New Jersey way of thinking and doing. Vermont and Connecticut are leading the charge. Why not us? Why not New Jersey?
We're here to support the most vulnerable, and what we're talking about today are those young people who are our future. This is really one of the most important things we can do in New Jersey.
Childcare is not a side issue. It's essential infrastructure, just like roads and bridges, libraries and public schools.
Don't put childcare centers out of business. We are here for the children. They're the future of the state of New Jersey. If parents can't work, what's going to happen? The state has to rethink what they're doing in the field of early childhood education.
When you have people who are working, they're contributing to taxes, but you're also starting to change communities. And so you're not going to spend as much money on social programs. Early investments will pay for themselves. We just need to do it. Families are being pushed to the breaking point, and so is our economy. But there is another way forward. When childcare works, parents work. When parents work, the economy grows. When the economy grows, we all thrive. So let's get to work together. Let's tell Trenton it's time to start strong, New Jersey.
Let's start strong, New Jersey.
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 Start strong, New Jersey. We got this.
Thank you all for taking a moment to watch that. My name is Megan Tavermina, and I am the Director of Public Policy for the New Jersey Association for the Education of Young Children and co-chair of the Start Strong New Jersey campaign. The stories you just saw reflect what many of us in the field experience every day, that early childhood education sits at the intersection of families, workforce, and community stability. As John shared, the blueprint was designed to outline a path forward for strengthening New Jersey's early learning system. What makes this effort different is the recommendations were not developed in isolation. From the beginning, we intentionally brought together a group of leaders from across the early childhood landscape to help shape the thinking behind them. This advisory council helped inform and develop the recommendations that appear in the blueprint. The goal was to ensure the work reflected the realities of the field, from the perspective of people operating programs, supporting families, and working within the broader system. Each of these leaders brought a different perspective to the conversation, helping ensure that the recommendations reflect the diverse ways early childhood programs and services operate across New Jersey. We asked a few members of the Advisory Council to briefly reflect on the perspective they brought to the process. To begin, I'd like to introduce Liana Jonke, Executive Director of Princeton Nursery School, who will share a brief reflection from the perspective of someone responsible for operating a community-based early learning program. Liana?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Liana Jonke, and I am the CEO of Princeton Nursery School. We're a nonprofit preschool program that just celebrated 97 years of service. We were founded in the Witherspoon-Jackson community, which is the formerly segregated community here in Princeton. It is rich in Black history and immigrant history here as well. And our mission is to really support families who have traditionally never had access to high quality care and early childhood education. In my role, I have the honor of overseeing our mission and the day-to-day operations that keep a school like ours running, and a nonprofit as well. I wear a number of hats, one of which is to ensure that we are meeting the needs of our children and their families. We primarily serve low and moderate income families, and the missing middle families are those to us also very, very vulnerable in having the biggest barriers to accessing high quality and affordable education and care. I also work to ensure that the needs of our teachers and our staff are met. Here at our school, 85% of our families, of our staff, identify as low or moderate income themselves. And so they are very reflective of the families that we serve. And a number of them have 15 or more years of commitment to childcare and early childhood education. And I oversee a small business. As a nonprofit, as a child care center, I have, a profit and loss statement. I'm concerned for revenue, balancing expenses, and I'm often questioned when I show up in these spaces for small businesses, why am I here? And I really do emphasize that child care centers and nonprofits are small businesses too. Between the many priorities that I juggle and the challenges, they are very reflective of systemic barriers that families have faced and childcare providers have also faced. I was honored to be a part of the Blueprints Advisory Committee. And when we first met, it actually felt like that scene in Lord of the Rings where everyone was coming together to really move forward. We had family care providers, nonprofit centers, the business sector represented, Head Start, advocacy groups, and philanthropic funders. So seeing the advisory group together really showed New Jersey's commitment to having diverse providers involved in the process, and the recommendations were a result of that our different experiences in our individual work really led to the same map, which was affordability for families, workforce that was uplifted and compensated for the professionals that they are, and a long-term investment that really ensures stability and recognizes childcare as an essential infrastructure for communities and our economy. And I'm grateful that the blueprint was developed in the model that it takes a village in order to move forward. Thank you all.
Thank you, Leanna, for grounding us in the realities of operating center-based programs. We also wanted to ensure that the blueprint reflects the perspective of family childcare, which plays such an important role in serving infants, toddlers, and families who need flexible care options. I'm pleased to introduce Nancy Jimenez, owner of Children's Garden Family Childcare, who helped bring that perspective into the advisory process. Nancy? While we wait for Nancy to come out of the Zoom group, we will move on to our next advisory member. I want to introduce you to Rebecca Zeidel, who is the president of the Coalition for Infant Toddler Educators and the former executive director of Child and Family Resources in Morris County. Rebecca is able to offer the advisory process voices from working across the broader early childhood infrastructure, supporting programs, connecting families to care, and helping systems function at the regional level. Rebecca?
Hi, hello everyone. I spent more than 30 years working in the early care and education sector, including serving as Executive Director of Child and Family Resources, the child care resource and referral organization serving Morris County. And I currently serve as the president of the New Jersey Coalition of Infant Toddler Educators. My work has always centered on supporting providers, educators, and families across the early childhood system. Child care resource and referral organizations sit at a unique intersection, connecting families, providers, community stakeholders, and state systems every single day. From that vantage point, you gain a clear view of how policies and infrastructure don't just affect individual programs, they shape the entire ecosystem. Systems-level decisions influence how families access care, how providers sustain their programs, how educators receive training and support, and how community stakeholders can coordinate resources more efficiently. That perspective is what I brought to the advisory decisions and discussions, a lens focused on the whole system, not just individual pieces of it, and on whether or not what we design would work as intended. A strong early learning system must support children at every stage of development, and yet infant and toddler care remains one of the most fragile and least supported parts of the system. When policies focus only on one age group or one type of provider setting, they can unintentionally create gaps that affect the children and families who need support the most. From an infant and toddler perspective, it is critical that systems and investments recognize birth through age 5 as one continuous developmental journey, and that family choice remains central to how children are supported at every stage along the way. The advisory process provided an important opportunity to ensure that the blueprint recommendations reflect how the early childhood system actually functions in practice. The goal was to lift up the need for stronger, more coordinated systems, ones that support providers and educators serving children across different ages and settings. That systems perspective helped shape recommendations that recognize the deeply interconnected nature of the early learning ecosystem. When systems are built thoughtfully and intentionally, they allow providers, educators, and families to focus on what matters most, supporting children across every stage of early development. There's a saying in public health to focus not just on the traveler, but on the road. And I think that the blueprint represents that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rebecca, for helping connect the system-level perspective to the work happening in programs and communities. And now I'd like to introduce Nancy Jimenez from Children's Garden Family Childcare. Nancy?
Hi, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Nancy Jimenez, and I am the owner of Children's Garden. I have been serving children and families in my community for over 28 years as a family childcare educator. And like many in my field, this work is both my profession and my passion. My journey into family childcare began as a working mother. At the time, I was working non-traditional hours and could not find childcare that could accommodate my schedule. I was faced with a difficult choice, my career or my daughter. I chose my daughter. Instead of leaving the workforce completely, I created a solution by opening a family childcare program so I could support families while also helping I could support my family while also helping other families who needed flexible, reliable care. What made this advisory committee process meaningful was that educators were not just consulted. We were at the table helping shape the conversation. Those of us working directly with children and families were able to share what it is actually happening in programs every day and speak honestly about the real conditions in the field. Family childcare educators play a critical role in early learning systems. We often care for the youngest children, infants and toddlers, provide flexible hours for working families, and operate small community-based programs within our communities. Yet too often, our perspective is missing from policy conversation. Being part of the advisory process helped ensure that family childcare educators are included in the solution being proposed. What makes this blueprint important is that it reflects the voices and experiences of the people doing this work every day. It recognizes that supporting families and children also means supporting educators and providers who care for them. I'm grateful to have had the opportunity to represent family childcare educators in this process and to help ensure that our voices are part of building a strong early learning system in New Jersey. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy, for highlighting the important role family childcare providers play in the early learning systems. Finally, we wanted to ensure that the blueprint also reflects the perspective of families and the broader economic context of childcare. I'm pleased to introduce Meredith Lipnick from Moms First, who will share a brief reflection on that perspective. Meredith?
Hi, everyone. It's an honor to join you today. I'm Meredith Lipnick, the Director of Private Sector Strategy at Moms First, a national nonprofit that advocates for affordable, accessible childcare. I also lead our National Business Coalition for Childcare with over 200 businesses representing over 600,000 employees. And I'm honored to work with the Start Strong New Jersey team through our membership. As many have already said today on the call, childcare is economic infrastructure. It is what drives our workforce and moves the economy forward. For that reason, the business community has true skin in the game. If employees don't have childcare, they can't come to work. Businesses can't grow, and businesses struggle with issues like absenteeism, retention, and reduced productivity. We know that when businesses make the investment in childcare or partner with government on public-private solutions, there is measurable and significant ROI, and we have the data to prove that. We worked last year with Boston Consulting Group on an ROI calculator and survey to see exactly how much benefit businesses were getting when they were investing in childcare. And what we found was beyond our dreams, up to 425% ROI when investing in childcare benefits seen through absenteeism, retention, recruitment, and productivity, being able to focus on work. If a parent is distracted or knows that an unreliable childcare system could take them away from their role, an employee is not able to produce to the best of their ability, and they're not able to support their company. So corporate partners have true skin in the game, investing in childcare solutions in their own individual companies and with the community and state at large. We've seen that when businesses do this, it really matters to policymakers. I have two examples to share from our work. One at the federal level, where we brought in businesses to advocate at Senate offices and Congress offices and saying, you know, we've invested in childcare. We see how it pays off for our workforce. And we also know that families can't afford to live and work in the places where we want to do business. We need support. Those legislators looked at us and said, business has never come into our office before to talk about childcare. And now that they're here, we really see the difference. And through that, we saw success at the federal level. We've also seen some of those neighboring states that were mentioned earlier in the webinar, Vermont, New Mexico, Connecticut, and even our neighbors in New York, able to pass policy with the support of the business community. So we know that when business comes to the table, policymakers listen and they start to see the economic infrastructure that we know childcare is. That's why we're members of Start Strong New Jersey. We know that childcare is essential state policy and employers need a seat at the table. Nothing moves without business, and it's a win-win for everyone. By understanding the business case, enacting internal policies, proudly sharing their stories of success, and showing up at policymakers' doors, businesses are a powerful player in driving change in the childcare landscape. And for good reason, because childcare is not simply a family issue, it's a workforce issue.
Thank you, Meredith, for grounding this conversation in broader economic realities that childcare is essential infrastructure for our workforce and our economy. Your perspective helps make clear that when childcare systems are unstable, it affects businesses, families, and communities alike. We're also grateful for the partnership of Moms First, whose leadership has helped elevate the connection between childcare, workforce participation, and economic growth. Thank you for being such a valued partner in advancing this work. Before we move into highlighting a few priority recommendations, I want to briefly return to the structure of the blueprint itself. As you heard earlier from John, and through the perspective shared by our advisory members, this work reflects a truly collaborative effort. Providers, advocates, policy experts, and system leaders all help shape the recommendations, bringing both policy knowledge and lived experience into the process. What emerged from that work is a framework built around three guiding principles: affordability for families, workforce stability, and long-term public investment. And one of the most important things to understand about this framework is that none of these principles work in isolation. For example, improving affordability for families cannot happen if programs themselves are struggling to cover the true cost of operating. Stabilizing the workforce cannot happen if programs do not have the financial structure needed to support competitive compensation. And long-term investment only works if it strengthens both access for families and the sustainability of the programs delivering care. You will see that connection throughout the blueprint. Each recommendation is part of a larger effort to move all three principles forward together, because strengthening one area without addressing the others will not produce the stability the field needs. If you're interested in exploring the full set of recommendations, I encourage you to visit startstrongnj.org, where you can find the full blueprint and a deeper dive into the ideas behind the work. What we'd like to do next is briefly highlight a few of the recommendations that are currently heading our advocacy work. Before we close this section of the program, we want to highlight these recommendations within the blueprint that reflect our current workings. The blueprint itself is designed to be flexible. Early childhood policy is shaped by both state and federal decisions, and the landscape can shift quickly. This framework allows the field to respond to those changes while still moving toward long-term stability. What we are highlighting today are examples of recommendations that reflect what many of us are actively working on right now. The first principle focuses on ensuring that families can access early learning without the cost becoming an impossible barrier to work. One of the most important recommendations in this area is fully funding the Child Care Assistance Program, or CCAP, so that every eligible family who qualifies for support can actually receive it. When CCAP functions as intended, it allows families to work, children to access stable care, and providers to maintain enrollment. But when funding does not keep pace with demand, the consequences are immediate. Enrollment pauses occur, families who qualify cannot access assistance, and providers, who are themselves small businesses, lose the revenue they depend on to keep their programs open. Fully funding CCAP means ensuring that all eligible families can access assistance while maintaining the program structures that support providers, including maintaining reimbursement rates, tiered reimbursement rates that reward quality, and enrollment-based payment models that provide stability when children are absent. Another important recommendation under this principle is expanding and modernizing family childcare capacity. Family child care providers are essential to the early learning system. They serve infants and toddlers, families working non-traditional hours, and communities where center-based care may be limited. Strengthening this sector means removing unnecessary barriers to entering the profession, supporting providers who want to grow their programs, and ensuring that family child care is recognized as a vital and sustainable part of the early learning ecosystem.
The second principle recognizes something that everyone in this room understands well. The early childhood system cannot function without the educators who make it possible. And so one recommendation within the blueprint is to establish a state-funded compensation framework tied to experience and credentials. Closing the compensation gap across early childhood settings is a large and complex challenge. And the blueprint recognizes that it will not be solved in a single step. This framework is intended as a guide, a starting structure that aligns with the state's career lattice and helps create a clearer connection between professional experience, credentials, and compensation across the field. By building a framework that aligns with the career lattice, the state can begin laying the groundwork for more consistent and transparent compensation systems that recognizes the professional role of early childhood educators. Another key recommendation is to build a no-cost, high-reward career pathways into the profession. New Jersey already has important programs in place, including the Apprenticeship Initiative and scholarships. The opportunity now is to build on those efforts and expand pathways that allow educators to grow professionally without taking on significant financial burden. You see, when educators can access education, credentials, and advancement opportunities without cost barriers, the field becomes more stable and the profession becomes more sustainable.
The third principle recognizes that early childhood education must be supported as long-term public infrastructure. One recommendation here is strengthening the systems for community-based providers in the public preschool system. New Jersey's preschool system relies on partnerships between school districts and community-based providers. As the system continues to expand, there is an important opportunity to strengthen how those partnerships work, including taking a closer look at how costs for community-based providers are calculated, supporting stronger collaboration between districts and providers, and making structural improvements that help ensure community programs can remain sustainable partners in delivering preschool. The final recommendation we want to highlight is integrating childcare into state economic and infrastructure planning. Childcare is essential infrastructure for working families, but it is also an industry made up of largely of small businesses. When the system is unstable, providers face rising costs, workforce shortages, and financial uncertainty that can threaten their ability to remain open. Recognizing childcare as both economic infrastructure and a small business sector allows policymakers to plan investments that support workforce participation, economic stability, and the sustainability of the program serving families every day. These examples represent only a portion of the recommendations within the blueprint, but they illustrate an important point. Affordability, workforce stability, and long-term investment are not separate challenges. They are interconnected pieces of the same system. And strengthening the early learning system will require movement across all three at the same time. These recommendations illustrate an important point. Affordability, workforce stability, and long-term investment cannot move forward separately. Strengthening the system requires the progress across all three, and those are just a few examples of the recommendations outlined in the blueprint, and we encourage you to explore the full document on the website. Before we move into questions, I'd like to introduce Becca Brubaker, who helps manage Start Strong New Jersey's day-to-day digital strategy. From maintaining the campaign website to leading our social media presence and coordinating the email program that keeps supporters connected to this work. Becca brings extensive experience into digital advocacy and communications, having built digital programs for national campaigns and policy organizations. She also brings a personal connection to this issue. As a daughter of two working parents who had access to affordable childcare, she experienced firsthand how early educators can change the trajectory of a child's life. Becca will briefly walk us through how partners can help amplify the campaign, share the blueprint, and stay engaged in the work ahead. Becca?
Hi, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here today. As Megan mentioned, my name is Becca Brubaker. I'm a proud South Jersey native from Haddonfield, New Jersey. Shout out to everyone from South Jersey on this call. And I'm going to walk you through kind of three different steps as to how you can stay engaged with the campaign and help us continue to advocate for affordable and accessible childcare in New Jersey on and offline. So first, I just kind of wanted to cover our digital presence so far. So we have a monthly newsletter that goes out. And I'm going to give you an opportunity to sign up for that in a moment. We also have a presence across social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, now called X, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And then we also have a website with an action center that highlights different ways that you can take action with us. But I thought it would be best while we're all gathered here to complete some of these steps together ourselves. So in the next slide here, we have an opportunity to join our campaign. So through signing our petition, you are entered into our contact database. Make sure that you have this checked off. I'm going to provide the link right now to join our campaign in the chat. I also have a QR code on the screen if that's easier for folks. And I ask that when you are done filling this out, if you could comment sign to let us all know that you have signed our petition, and then we can move forward to the next action step. So I'm going to give folks a couple of minutes to do that. Amazing. Karen has previously signed. We love to hear it. I know some folks on this call may have already signed the petition, in which case you have already completed this step, which is awesome. Awesome. So has Sarah. Great. Amazing. Oh my gosh, so many people have already signed this. I love to hear that. Amazing. Great. Okay, I'm going to give folks, since a lot of folks have already signed this, I'm going to give another minute to those who have not signed this, and then we'll move on to the next action item. Amazing. We have some new signers coming through. Amazing. Great. Amazing. Okay, so we have some new signers and some folks who have already signed before, which is great. So I'm going to take that as a sign. We're going to move to step 2 here of how to get involved, which is follow us across social media. I'm going to throw the links as well into the chat like I did previously. And then if you could just comment followed when you're done. So I know that you have followed us. I know not everybody has all, accounts on all these social media platforms, which is understandable. But if you can follow us on the ones that you do have accounts on, that would be absolutely great. So we can amplify our message online together. So I'm going to give folks, I'll give folks until 2:50 to follow us on social media. Amazing. And you'll notice that today we actually posted about the great news that happened yesterday during Governor Sherrill's budget address. So if you would like to share that to your stories, repost, that would be great. Very exciting news, and we're excited to continue, working together to build upon that. Great. See some folks are following us. Followed on Facebook. Love to hear it, Betsy. Brenda has followed us. Love that. I hear my phone or feel my phone vibrating on my chair, which is great. That means a lot of folks are following. Amazing. All right, gonna give a little bit more time and then we'll move on to our last step. Great. All right, looks like most people have followed through with this. So we'll go to our final step here, which is, this is brand new, so hopefully no one has probably seen this one yet. This is our brand new blueprint for affordable childcare social media toolkit. So some of you may have been exposed to our last toolkit, which is just a general Start Strong NJ social media toolkit. This one is specifically about the blueprint and how to share about it on your own social media platforms or the social media accounts that you have through your organization. So I'm going to send out this link here. If you have any troubles viewing it, let me know. You shouldn't, but I recommend bookmarking this through Chrome, Firefox, whatever internet provider that you use, so that you can have it on hand to post on your own social media accounts and get the word out about the blueprint. So if you could comment bookmarked once you have saved this to your computer, whether you download the link or save it to your bookmarks bar, that would be great for me to know. Great. Linda has done that. Amazing. All right. We love to see it. All right. Well, as folks continue to bookmark and save our toolkit, I'm going to toss it back over for Q&A. Thank you all so much, and I look forward to communicating with you online.
Thank you so much, Becca. Really appreciate it. I've been answering questions kind of throughout the presentation. I didn't want us to run out of time. There is a question that I was thinking I could just answer live. Can you share a bit about how parents and providers are part of the decision-making table for this campaign? I'm interested in ways that you all are making sure it's grounded in the community. So I think one of the things I would start off by saying, and Megan, feel free to jump in if But this campaign has always been about partnership and shared leadership. And so we really, truly believe in hearing from the community. In addition, I think part of why this is such a passion project of ours is that we've both spent more than 20 years in the field. And in many ways, the blueprint reflects what we've been hearing from the field for many years. Megan, is there anything you would like to add?
No, absolutely. I think that bringing on the advisory council, but to represent some of those voices was very intentional because as former childcare providers, I think Winifred and I both tether to the idea of, are we really capturing the reality of the day to day of how this is playing out? I always say like how it's being lifted off the paper. So I think it's one of the many strengths of the campaign that it is deeply rooted in the voice of providers, parents, and people who work at the intersection of the systems as well. So I greatly appreciate that question.
Okay, so another question is, what is the process and how will you advocate to hold the public school to work with private centers? We see Board of Education is currently expanding their own programs rather than working with us. Oh boy, this has definitely been an issue that we have been tackling, we've been talking about, and we continue to talk about. Megan, you want to start? Would you like for me to start?
Sure. I appreciate this being highlighted, and anybody that sits in the space of early learning in New Jersey, this is top of mind. And it is top of mind for us, both in the work of the blueprint, but also in our day-to-day advocacy. We recognize that the opportunity for preschool expansion is good for children and families if and when it is implemented correctly. We are deeply committed to ensuring that trusted community-based providers are brought into the implementation process as partners so that we can see children and families benefiting from this. And so large advocacy around funding is one step. But as I had mentioned earlier, the devil's in the details. It's around the implementation, it's around the partnerships, and we are working actively, not just with the launch of this blueprint. This has been top of our advocacy agenda for some time now, and we will continue that charge.
The other thing I would say is, I can put my information in the chat, but we literally would love to continue to hear from the field about districts that are unwilling to partner. We know that this is a real reality across New Jersey. And so we've been elevating this issue at definitely the state level. And so I'm going to drop my information in the chat. Please reach out so that we can hear from you directly. Let me see if I see any other questions. Another question. What is the role of the CCR&R in this? Megan, you want to take that?
Sure. We're very lucky to have not one, but two voices on our advisory council that represented the roles of the R&Rs. Child Care Resource and Referral Agencies are a resource that we have in our state that we need to continue to work with to build strong systems so that we are all kind of swimming in the same direction. And so continued partnership with our resource and referral agencies is essential to ensuring that we have strong systems to really lift all of these complex parts of the childcare industry off the page and ensuring that children, families, and providers have what they need. So they are strong partners for us as we think about how this work unfolds. Winifred, you're on mute.
Perfect. I am seeing no other questions. I am just trying to multitask, drop my information in the chat. And make sure everyone has it for there we go, I think. Okay. I just dropped my information in the chat for preschool partnership challenges. All right, seeing no questions, I think I could go into my closing remarks. How does that sound? All right. I just want to wrap up today's launch by saying thank you all so very much for joining us and for the role that you play in strengthening childcare across New Jersey. I want to start by thanking all of the speakers who helped guide today's conversation and the many partners who contributed their time, expertise, and lived experience to shaping the Start Strong New Jersey Blueprint. What we shared today reflects something many of us already know. New Jersey has made meaningful progress in supporting young children and working families, but the childcare system that families and businesses depend on is still under enormous pressure. Families are struggling to afford care, providers are struggling to keep their doors open, and early childhood educators who are doing some of the most important work in our state are too often undervalued and underpaid. At the same time, we know something else to be true. New Jersey has the leadership, the partnerships, and the momentum to build the childcare system that our family and our economy needs. The Start Strong New Jersey Blueprint is a path forward, one that recognizes childcare as essential economic infrastructure and outlines the steps needed to make affordable, high-quality care accessible to the families who need it. Today's launch is not the end of a conversation. It is the beginning of a statewide effort to ensure that childcare becomes the priority it needs to be. Because the reality is simple. New Jersey doesn't work without childcare. Thank you so very much for being part of this effort and for the role each of you will play in helping ensure that every child in our state gets the strong start they deserve. And together, we have an opportunity to change that. Let's start strong, New Jersey. Enjoy the rest of your day.